the basic background and history of, well, is it Britain? And this is really the first thing to work out. What's the difference? I mean, in England, you know, Britain, okay. Anything else? Any other words we've got? We've got quite a lot of different words. The United Kingdom, okay, what's that? You know, so in Japanese it's Igirisu or Eikoku, but even then it doesn't clearly explain what exactly is Igirisu different from Eikoku? Is Scotland part of it? You know, it's kind of complicated, I think, for people coming from Japan, or indeed from most countries. I mean, I lived in Spain for a long time, and most people in Spain didn't understand it either, okay? So let's go through some of that. Here's a map, okay? Now, there's no political lines drawn on the map. If we just think of it as an area of the planet, a part of our planet, what is that part of the planet called? Sorry? It's not, you wouldn't know, there's only a little corner. I mean, it's part of Europe, okay, yes, it's true, it's part of Europe, but, you know, it's not got the whole of Europe, it's not a map of Europe. If somebody said, they'd say, well, wait a minute, that's only a little bit of the mainland of Europe. Most of it is an island, and mostly Europe isn't an island, so...
I didn't understand.
I'm sorry. What can we see there? Hmm? You can see an island. Can you see one island or more than one island? Two big islands and some. Okay. Now, is there a name? Is there a name for those? You know, that recto, that kind of group of islands. Two big islands and several small ones. What name would we give to that? Pretty much, not quite. What we'd actually call it is the British Isles. Okay, so if you were looking at it, not politically, but just as a piece of land, as an area of the planet, its name is the British Isles. Okay, so that includes two big islands, right? Good. And so the British Isles is just a geographical name. It's not a political name. It's the name of this group of islands that lies off the coast of Europe that we're studying in our course. And the two main islands, one of them is called Britain or Great Britain. Basically, Britain and Great Britain is the same. There's not a big difference. Can you see in the bottom corner, can you see a little area sticking out here? That's called Brittany in France. Okay, so basically the name that we're using, Britain, it came from the Roman people. When the Roman people came up from Italy, they arrived here and they found Celtic people. And when they crossed over here, they found the same Celtic people. But this was a much bigger place than this one. So they called this one Great Britain, and they called this one Little Britain, or just Britain. And today we call that Brittany, or in French, Bretagne. Okay, Bretagne is the little Celtic country in the north that the Romans found, and Britain is the big one. So originally it was called Great Britain, not because it was Sugoi Britain, but because it was Oki Britain. Right? It was bigger than the Celtic kingdom in France. But the Mizoku wa onaji deshita node, they call them both Britain. Britannia Major, Britannia Menor. Britannia Menor is Latin for smaller Britain, and Major means bigger, big. So we've got these two main islands. One of them is Britain, and the other one is Ireland. Okay? And all right, let's move along to the next. We've got 4 countries here. This is now a political map. It's divided the area into 4 different countries. Do we know the names of those 4 countries? Right.
Scotland, England, Wales,
Scotland, England, Wales,
and Ireland.
and Ireland. And you were basically, yeah. All right. So we're clearer about that. We can see that, okay? We've got a fairly reasonable idea. The next problem is, what's the relationship between those different countries? Okay, so we've got these 4 countries. There they are. Okay, Scotland in the north of Britain, England in the south, and Wales in the west. And then the separate island is called Ireland. So these 4 countries, for a long time, Britain was basically 4 countries like this. Okay, good. For hundreds of years, the British Isles were divided politically into 4 countries. If you go back more than hundreds of years, if you go back 1,000 years or something, those small countries were also divided. Just like, you know, the king that you have in Japanese now, they were countries, you know, with their own kind of ruler 1,000 years ago. Okay, same thing in Britain. These were divided up into smaller countries, but that's suguru for today. We just look at those 4 from the time they became 4 countries, 1000 年ぐらい前. And they all have a different culture, a different history. So it's pretty important if you're studying, it doesn't matter if you're studying early modern Britain or any period, you need to understand the differences between these 4 countries. So the next step would be to say, okay, these 4 countries as a group, politically, what do we call them? Huh? That's right. Basically, it would be the United Kingdom, but it was not the United Kingdom in this period, and it is still not exactly true to say that this is the United Kingdom now. So it's quite complicated, isn't it? But in the 19th century, 19 seiki, yes, that was the United Kingdom. Okay, so we'll take that as the basic idea for the United Kingdom. Because Wales, 中世時代から, a long time ago in the Middle Ages, Wales became kind of controlled by England in the 13th century. And then in the early 18th century, Scotland joined together with England, and then that became the United Kingdom. Britain was one country, so the United Kingdom was Britain. Suddenly, it's not England, Scotland, and Wales, it's Britain. Okay? But notice that's in the beginning of the 18th century. So for our period, basically, I'm talking about England all the time. だいたい England の話です. I'm not talking so much about Scotland and Wales. I'm talking about basically England. And then in the 19th century, the beginning of the 19th century, Ireland became part of the United Kingdom. So then it became the United Kingdom of Britain and Ireland. Okay? But even that, それでも今, it's not like that. Okay? It's changed again. There's something else we'd need to change on the map before we can say it's the United Kingdom. Do you know what it is? No? Okay. The United Kingdom these days is only part of Ireland, not the whole of Ireland. So in 1922, most of Ireland left the United Kingdom. And today, the United Kingdom is England, Wales, Scotland, and Kita Airlando dake, Northern Ireland only. Southern Ireland is an independent country. It has different money. It has a different government. It's dokuritsu. Okay, it's not part of the United Kingdom. Jibun no, okay, seiji, jibun no okane. All right, it's a different country. So Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland are Ireland divided itself into two different countries. So we're looking at the map. Really, today we say, well, there are 5 countries. And again, why did Ireland divide itself? Well, the roots, the origins of that are in our period. We'll look at that, during this course, why Ireland divided like that. So that's part of our history for this course. But I think now we understand a little bit, what the difference is between England and Britain, or Britain and the United Kingdom, and the British Isles. Okay, I think if we can understand the basics, we'll be able to talk much more clearly about what's going on. And if you ever go there, please be careful. If you go to Scotland, don't tell them that they're English, because they're not. They don't like it. Okay, they're not very happy to be. And the same in Wales, and even more so in Ireland. The Irish people are not even British. Okay, they're Irish. They're not from Britain. Okay, people are very proud of their origins, and there are strong political reasons why people feel angry if you make a mistake. It's okay, they won't, fight you or something, but they feel chotto komatta.
How about people in Northern Ireland?
People in Northern Ireland, they mostly do, many of them do, the Protestants in Northern Ireland, many of them would say, yes, I'm British, even though technically they're not. It's very complicated, isn't it? Okay, but we'll get into those more Kouashi kind of questions later on in the course. For now, basically, just there is a really big difference especially between Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England. Those 3 are much closer together. England is much different and separate. Okay? Do you know why?
Because England always controls.
Well, part of it is the feeling that England is the controlling area, the capital is in London, and yes, okay, but there's something else. Well, let's find out. Okay, let's take a look. I have to go back here into what they call Indo-European culture, because Europe, before the Indo-European people, Europe was a kind of Sekijidai, the people from that period are kind of really prehistoric humans, okay? We don't know very much about them. We have a few of their bones and a few of their living, we don't know very much about them. But the Indo-European culture is still very much here, still very alive. The Indo-European groups included several different groups of people. Most of the European people belong to one or other of the different Indo-European groups. One of the groups is called Celts, and another of the groups is called Germans. Is that a hint yet? Scotland, Wales, Ireland, Celtic. England, that's it, you got it. Scotland, Wales, and Ireland are Celtic. And England is originally German. The English language belongs to the German group of languages. The Celtic language is completely different. Their culture is different. Let's take a look at the history. Zutto mukashi no rekishi. We've got Indo-European culture spreading out from somewhere around the Caspian Sea. Can you see it clearly? Is it reasonably clear? This area here is the kind of origin of Indo-European culture. It's spread out north, south, east, and west in every direction. Hindu is a European language in origin. Okay, Sanskrit is an Indo-European Indo-European language. It's got the same origin. Okay? There are some, not very many, but some words have a history that goes right back to the original Indo-European source, so that you can see the connections and the grammatical connections with the original Indo-European language. So we want to focus on this area here, the European area, so I'll blow that up a little bit. If I blow it up a little bit more, like that, and we can see that there are, about 5,000 years ago, there are, you asked about the Vikings, the Scandinavian group, they went into the north. The Greek group, okay, in the south east there. The Latin Roman group in Italy. The Spanish Iberian Celt, who were a slightly different type of Celt from the Celts that went into the northern areas. Okay, the Celtic or Gaelic peoples who went into Britain and Ireland, and the Germanic group that went up here, okay, well, around Germany, that sort of area. So this was all happening Gosingnemmai, okay, a long time ago, 5,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, all right? So you can see the Germanic group and the Celtic group were separate at that time. They had different languages, their languages, you know, grew separately. 基本的に同じでしたけど、何百年間、no communication, no contact, the languages changed and became completely different languages, or very different languages. I think the origin is the same, but the languages are very different because they changed. So basically, the people of England are of Germanic origin, and the people of Ireland, Scotland, and Wales are Celtic. So this is a very important thing to understand about the culture before we get started on anything else. Okay. So let's take a very quick look at Britain before the English. Now, 2000 年前ぐらい, 2,000 years ago, Britain had some visitors, the Romans. Okay, the Roman Empire spread out and it arrived as far as Britain. So when they arrived, they found Celtic people basically in 3 different groups. Okay? You've got the ancient Britons or Brythonic Celts. You've got the Gaelic Celts in Ireland, and you've got the Picts in Scotland. Historians and archaeologists are not quite sure about the Picts. They're not really sure. They might have been an earlier Stone Age group. So, I don't know. It was a long time ago. I wasn't there. But seems quite likely that all these 3 groups were Celtic groups. So their languages were a little bit different, but they were like 今のノルウェー語とスウェーデン語。とても近いけど、別なスペイン語とポルトガル語。Okay? とても似てるけど。Okay? 日本語の場合、there's nothing that's very similar to Japanese. Okay? Japanese is like, you know, it's a very kind of, on the tree of languages, it's very much on its own. Zutto mukashi, maybe Kankokugo, you know, was connected, and maybe Zutto mae, there were other languages, but they've all become very, very different. The Indo-European languages are like a tree with many branches that are quite close together. Okay? So, all right, the Celtic languages will be like that. The Germanic languages might be like that. Okay? Okay, they're not completely isolated in the way that Japanese is as a language. So the Celtic people, imademo, especially the Scottish and the Irish, they understand each other's language pretty well. But it is a completely different language. It's not like English. Okay, I lived in Wales for 1 year when I was a research student, and I was in a part of Wales where people speak Welsh. So I couldn't learn to speak Welsh, it was much too difficult, but I learned to be kind of ni kimono because I was an English person who could ask for his beer in Welsh. Right? So I'll tell you. Now in England, when we want a beer, we say, can I have a pint of bitter, please? Bitter is beer no shuru. Okay? Because if you ask for beer in an English pub, it's like asking for fruit in a fruit shop. Shuru iwanaito. Okay? So we say, can I have a pint of bitter? Okay? Okay, so I want to say the same thing in Wales. Gai pai gwirro chwerros gwenanda. Gai means can I have? Gai, can I have? Pai, a glass. Gwirro chwerro, bitter beer, os gwenanda, please. Okay? Now it's completely different, isn't it, from English. It's not a dialect of English. It's a much older language, and it's a complete language, and they're still speaking it especially in Wales, they're still speaking. Everybody speaks English, but there are many towns where everybody still speaks Welsh. Okay? And in Scotland and Ireland, they have their own languages in the same way. In Wales, the language is still quite strong. Okay? So that's what the Romans found. They found these Celtic people, and the Romans came in, and they basically, Roman Britain was the kind of south area here. All right, so you've got the three different kinds of Celts, and it's the area of the ancient Britons that the Romans stayed in. They took control of most of that area. And then 450 years later, they left because Rome was attacked, and they went back to their empire ended, and mostly things were fairly similar. It was still the same three groups of people, all right, the Picts and the Gaels and the Brythonic Celts. So things were, still those same three groups of people when they left. Basic things that the Romans did was they introduced roads. They had big cities. The Celtic people just lived in small communities. They didn't have big towns or cities. And the religion, Christianity, which the Romans ended up spreading across Europe. So apart from those roads and things and cities, there's not much influence of the Romans. They came, they stayed for 500 years, they went back home. What's important is, while they were there, nobody else came. The Romans are there. Oh. Okay? But when the Romans left, hey, let's go over there. All right? And that's when the English people came. So we get something called Anglo-Saxon Britain. We've got these three Celtic groups here. And then after Rome collapses, we get invasion from Europe. Basically, Germanic peoples coming over. I'm not quite sure why they wanted to come, but they came. And there were three groups of them, the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. And they sort of mixed together fairly quickly and made a group that we call Anglo-Saxon. So that's really the beginning of the country England. So they arrive, the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes, and the Britons are pushed to the west. They're pushed out. Like that. Okay? We still find them, especially in Wales. That's where they are today. Okay? Still speaking that language. Okay? They're still speaking that language. But these people, of course, were speaking a Germanic language with Anglo-Saxon or Old English. So Anglo, okay, England is Anglo no kuni, England, namai no genyin. Okay, England is Angle land. Okay. The Angles, Saxons, the Jutes, they're establishing several different countries inside that area. Okay, there are seven different kingdoms at this stage. So that's the beginning of England. And the people known as the Anglo-Saxon people. Sometimes just Saxon. Daitai 11世紀から大体 Saxon だけしか言わない. And the language was Anglo-Saxon or Old English. Okay, a lot of people, Shakespeare, okay, 私たちの時代の Shakespeare. A lot of people say, oh, Shakespeare, all that Old English. 違うよ. Shakespeare spoke modern English. Early modern English. Do you know any words of Shakespeare? To be or not to be, that is the question. That's the same. To be or not to be, that is the question. It's the same English. Okay? He didn't speak it, but Anglo-Saxon, わかったら全然わからない. Again, it's a completely different language. Okay? Beowulf was a brem, a blade with a sprang, and you don't understand it. Okay? It's a different language. And its closest relative is German. It's a Germanic language. And the culture of the Anglo-Saxon people was basically a Germanic culture. And so the first Anglo-Saxon settlers arrived in the 5th century, and they created their own kingdoms inside Britain. Then you get the Vikings coming along in the 9th and 10th centuries, and they took control of various parts of Britain. In fact, one part of England became known as the Danelaw. So the Vikings were in control of these different... They came from Scandinavia. Well, having these, as I say, like kind of kaizoku, very violent, very frightening people coming, the Anglo-Saxon people said, 私たちいろんな国に分けてるけど、彼らが怖いから協力しましょう. Why don't we come together, make ourselves strong, and be one united country against the Vikings? So they started to unite their country against the Vikings in the 9th century. And then in 1066, in the 11th century, Vikings attacked the north of England. And Harold, the Saxon king, led an army northwards, and he beat them, he defeated them. But then, just after that, another group of, well, the Normans. The Normans were originally Vikings, but they'd been in France for 200 years or so. They spoke French. So French-speaking people of Viking origin. They attacked in the south. You got a situation like this. Here's England. That's like 200 kilometers. And Harold and his army march up Rondonkara 300 kilo gurai, to a place in York called Stamford Bridge. And they fight a big battle and they win. Yay, yatta ne! But then, sugu, they had to go back because another group, another army had invaded in the south. So the Battle of Hastings in October 1066, the Anglo-Saxon army was very weak. They were very tired. A lot of them had been killed in the north, so they weren't so strong, and they lost that battle. So the Norman people invaded. The Battle of Hastings, very famous battle. The Saxon king was killed, and the leader of the Norman army, William, took control of England. So what you get now in the Chusei Jidai is England itself, wakitemasu. It's divided. The elite people are the Normans, and the lower class people are the Anglo-Saxons. So the Anglo-Saxons become that kind of second-class people. And the system was called the feudal system. These would be Anglo-Saxon people living under the shadow of the Norman castle and the church. They were controlled by the religion, they were controlled by the elite Normans. And the serfs, the serf is kind of chotto dorei no chikai, okay, kind of like, almost like slaves serving the Norman masters. And this situation continued for several hundred years. So that if we look at the situation, at first, of course, the Saxons were speaking their Germanic language and the Normans were speaking French. Okay, so you've got Old English from the serfs and Norman French from the elite. But then the languages start to mix together. You know, as they try to communicate with each other, they start gairaigo and, they start mixing their languages. And then in the end, so they end up with basically one language that everybody speaks, and that language is early modern English, the language that Shakespeare spoke. Okay, the language of this Tudor and Stuart period that we're going to be studying. So around about 1450 is the kind of turning point, a little bit, around about, the beginning of Tudor England in 1485, or a little bit before that, the country was really coming together with one language, one basic culture, and the Chusei Jidai was coming to an end. The Middle Ages were coming to an end, and we're coming into this period that we call the early modern period. Okay, 1450 is like a kind of watershed time, more or less the end of the Middle Ages. Of course, it doesn't happen all at once. People don't suddenly wake up and say, "Oh, I'm not medieval anymore. I'm early modern." But when we look at it, we can see, oh yeah, the culture is changing around the middle of the 15th century, and that's the period that we're studying. That's what we're going to be looking at. So today's class was just to give you a little kind of image about what that culture was like. Okay? So what do you need to do for me this week? Send me an email and I'll invite you to join the blog. You can just send me an email if you just want to be practical, or you can give me some information about yourself or tell me some message if you want to. Okay? And then I'll send you an invitation to the blog, and questions, comments, ideas, anything you want to say, put it on the blog. And if you're too shy to put it on the blog, send it to me and I'll put it up, okay, with no name. All right? Okay. All right? Yeah? Everybody happy?